Have you noticed that things haven't been quite good lately? And I'm not talking about the overall world situation, but rather how the things we buy are, you know, a little worse than they were about 10 years ago. This made me start a journey thinking, okay, I'm hearing a lot of stories from many people in my life, from coffee makers to cell phones, computers, sweaters, everything tearing or breaking much faster than it used to. What's going on? And is there a way to escape this consumer trash pile? So, let's talk about it in a very basic way, starting with the design process. When a company wants to create something like, say, a jacket, there are three main factors to consider. Functionality, does it work? Appearance, is it beautiful? And manufacturing, is it easy and relatively cheap to make many of these things? Generally, a good product will have a balanced mix of these three elements. But in recent years, this balance has kind of gone off stage. Let's look at clothes, for example. In the past, if you needed a new jacket, you used to go to a tailor, measure yourself, choose the material, and have it made. After decades of doing that, instead of going to a tailor, we started going to department stores and buying mass-produced items. In the 80s and 90s, we had tons of options and stores to choose from. Now, many of us just go online, click Add to Cart, and buy a product without seeing it in person. But it's not just about how we buy, it's about how often we buy. And for that, we can kind of blame this guy, Ernest Elmo, an amazing name. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, he wrote an article like, "Okay, the government should really support this idea of planned obsolescence." He didn't call it planned obsolescence, though. He called it consumer engineering. Remember that jacket you bought? Well, it's a new season and it's out of style. Buttons are out, zippers are in. So you buy something new. But not because there was something physically wrong with the original. That's why it's called consumer engineering, right? It's up there, in the head. And we've been living like this for decades. Now we all want the next best thing all the time, and that demand has gotten out of control. Today, we are surrounded. The speed of certain trend cycles and the fact they are geared towards these micro-communities. Like, for instance, Stanley mugs, when maybe a year ago it was Hydro Flask bottles. The result is that we buy a lot. A 2021 survey found that nearly 40% of UK consumers buy clothes at least once a month. The UN reports that between 2000 and 2014, the average person was buying 60% more clothes, and each item was kept for half the time. We want to buy many things quickly, and because we replace our things so frequently, we don't really want to spend a lot of money on it, which also has an effect. People aren't willing to pay more for something they bought some time ago. So, if I paid 30 rials for a bra 10 years ago, it would be very difficult to pay 50 rials now, even though labor costs have increased in the last 10 years. So, what we have is an incredibly fast cycle of demand for low-cost products, and this is what it looks like. To speed up manufacturing, companies have to hire more people, change how the product is made, or both. But they also need to keep prices low enough for consumers to keep buying. So they may start swapping materials like cotton or silk for a cheaper synthetic material, or rely on a simpler stitching pattern that might not hold up as well. So if after 10 years you're still paying the same price, or almost the same price, for a product that looks the same, well, something had to change. So you might say, fashion trends are changing too fast and we buy too much. But why is my dishwasher crap? And that's a great question. Let's talk about technology. When things like computers first entered our daily lives, it made a lot of sense to upgrade devices frequently. There were significant differences in what a 2-year-old device could do compared to a brand new one. They were big leaps. If you had something that was 2 years old, you probably couldn't do half the cool things the new guy could do. So it kind of fueled the replacement cycle because you really got something better in terms of functionality. For example, when the iPhone was first released, it was a big revolution. Subsequent phones, to some extent, responded to significant technological advances. Look at the difference between the 3GS and the 4. The iPhone 4 had a much better resolution and a front camera. For a while, these significant advances between models were the norm for technology. But we're not making these giant changes as frequently now. Instead, partly to make us want to buy more things, companies make very small adjustments year after year. So, the dryer you have now may play a fun song at the end of the cycle instead of beeping. And now, as devices have advanced and become more complicated, there was another problem for consumers. All these things started coming into the world. They didn't come with repair tools. They came to be thrown away. Basically, when these things break, it's often intentionally impossible to fix. Because if you buy something that has a computer chip or a circuit board or whatever, you probably can't make one in your garage. So you rely a lot on what the manufacturer will agree to sell. And often they don't agree to sell parts and tools and diagnostics or even provide a diagram. But sometimes it really isn't possible to fix because they cut corners, just like in fashion, replacing metal and screws with plastic and glue. And these kinds of problems apply to all technology, from phones to toasters, blenders, even electric wheelchairs and cars. If you walk around your house or apartment and start cataloging how many things you own that have chips, I think you'll be really surprised at the size of this lack of repair problem. I don't want you to feel guilty for participating in this system, where so many people have been culturally raised to think this way or buy this way. Compared to other bad things in the world, we actually have a surprisingly amount of control over this situation. With technology, advocating for the right to repair is really extremely effective. As consumers, it will take a bit for us to wade through all this trash and re-educate our brains a bit. But we can take small steps to regain control of the process. After all these things should be made for us.